Sam Altman just admitted on camera that someone is about to lose a phenomenal amount of money. Not millions, not billions. We're talking trillions with a T. And the wildest part, he said this while simultaneously announcing OpenAI would spend more trillions they don't have. But here's what nobody's telling you. The AI bubble isn't just about inflated stock prices. It's about something far more sinister, and you're the product they're betting on. Let me show you something that should terrify you. Nvidia, the company selling the chips powering this entire AI revolution, just became the first $5 trillion company in history. Their stock jumped 1,500% in 5 years. Jensen Huang literally called AI more transformative than electricity, medicine, the PC, internet, even the wheel. But buried in footnote 247 of their quarterly filings is a number nobody talks about. 70 to 80% of Nvidia's revenue comes from just 6 companies. 6. Google, Amazon, Meta, OpenAI, Oracle, Microsoft, that's it. The official story says this is normal market concentration, but look at this timeline. In 2024, these same 6 companies spent $344 billion on AI infrastructure. That's over 1% of America's entire GDP. Then Meta gets punished by investors for spending too much, losing $200 billion in market value overnight. 3 coincidences? Sure. But when Amazon lays off 14,000 workers the same week they post record revenue growth, you start asking different questions. Here's what they don't tell you. This isn't about building better technology. Every conversation you have with ChatGPT, every midnight anxiety question about your relationship, every career decision you outsource to AI, you're not using a tool, you're feeding the most sophisticated psychological profiling system ever created. Remember that detail about 6 companies. It becomes critical in exactly 3 minutes when I show you what they're really building. Let me explain something most people don't understand about how AI companies actually make money, or rather, how they don't. OpenAI brought in $4.3 billion in revenue in the first half of 2025. Sounds incredible, right? Until you see the other number, they lost $13.5 billion in that same period. They're burning $3 for every dollar they make. Now here's where it gets interesting. Only 5% of ChatGPT's 800 million users actually pay. That means 760 million people use it for free, and every single question costs OpenAI money. They even launched ChatGPT Pro at $200 per month, more than most Americans' car payments. And Altman publicly admitted they still lose money at that price. So ask yourself, why would a company hemorrhaging billions spend hundreds of millions on their biggest ad campaign ever to acquire more free users who make them lose more money? The answer isn't about subscriptions. It never was. Let's talk about what's actually being built with these trillions. Data centers now consume 1.5% of the world's electricity, and that number could double by 2030. The U.S. power grid, built in the 1960s and 70s, is running at just 15% reserve capacity. Your electricity bill has nearly doubled in 3 years. In areas near data centers like Baltimore and Buffalo, wholesale electricity costs are up 267% since 2020. You're literally paying to train the AI that might replace your job. Goldman Sachs says new large-scale power capacity won't come online until 2028. Data center vacancy rates are below 3%. The AI boom is slamming into a literal wall. There's nowhere left to plug it all in. But remember those 6 companies I mentioned? They're not slowing down. They can't. Here's the mechanism nobody explains. 1/3 of US GDP growth right now comes from data center construction. The wealth effect from AI stocks inflating the market has the top 10% of earners driving 49% of all consumer spending. That's up from 35% before the pandemic. This creates a dependency loop. If Meta or Amazon pulls back on AI spending, Nvidia's revenue crashes. That punctures the stock market bubble. Wealthy consumers who've been spending based on their inflated portfolios suddenly tighten their belts. Consumer spending, which is 2/3 of the economy, collapses. David Einhorn from Greenlight Capital put it bluntly: a tremendous amount of capital destruction is going to come through this cycle. The Shiller cyclically adjusted PE ratio shows the stock market is more overvalued than any time in history except the dot-com bubble in 2000. We've concentrated what should have been 10 to 15 years of infrastructure spending into just 3 years. Nvidia's revenue growth has already peaked. It hit 262% year over year in 2024. Now it's down to 56%. Still impressive, but the deceleration has begun. Now let's talk about what happens to people who try to expose this system. November 2024. A 26-year-old OpenAI researcher, 4 years at the company, goes public claiming they're violating copyright law. He's set to testify in the New York Times lawsuit against OpenAI. He's found dead in his San Francisco apartment, single self-inflicted gunshot wound, door locked from inside, no investigation. His mother calls it cold-blooded murder. An independent autopsy contradicts the official findings. Tucker Carlson asked Altman directly about this. Watch his response. I really do think he committed suicide. But look at his body language, that lowercase Twitter Innocence Act. The NDAs OpenAI forces employees to ban them from criticizing the company for life. Acknowledging the NDA existed was itself a violation. What does a company have to hide that requires lifetime silencing of former employees? Here's the piece everyone misses. The business model was never about subscriptions or enterprise software. When you pour your consciousness into ChatGPT, should I quit my job? Is my relationship worth saving? Why do I feel so empty? You're giving them behavioral data about how humans think, what breaks them, what motivates them, what they fear. Stanford research shows that after just 5 interactions with biased chatbots, people's political views move toward the AI's bias. Democrats and Republicans both shift toward whatever position the bot presents. OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and Anthropic signed dramatic letters warning AI could cause human extinction. Then what happened? OpenAI raised billions more. Google accelerated development. Meta poured in more resources. This is regulatory capture 101. Heavy regulation crushes small competitors and open source developers, but companies with armies of lawyers can navigate it easily. Standard Oil loved safety regulations. Compliance costs killed small refineries. Big Pharma loves FDA approval processes that cost hundreds of millions. Jan LeCun, Meta's chief AI scientist, called them out directly. If your fear-mongering campaign succeeds, a small number of companies will control AI. Sam Altman just launched a brain-computer interface startup called Merge Labs. Not invasive like Neuralink, they're using ultrasound and gene therapy to modify cells in your brain to respond to sound waves. At a press dinner, he said, I would like to be able to think something and have ChatGPT respond to it. Maybe I want read-only. That seems reasonable. Read-only. They want direct access to your thoughts. And get this, OpenAI removed language prohibiting military use. They're now working directly with the Pentagon. Meta's CTO, Palantir's CTO, and 2 OpenAI executives were sworn in as lieutenant colonels in the Army Reserve. Silicon Valley executives literally wearing Army uniforms. The Pentagon split $600 million among Anthropic, Google, and xAI for defense AI tech. So what happens when this pops? MIT found 95% of companies using generative AI saw zero return on investment. Amazon just cut 14,000 jobs despite posting 13% revenue growth. UPS cut 48,000. The hiring rate is at its lowest level since 2008. Julian Guerin, former UBS commodity strategist, says this bubble is already 17 times larger than the dot-com crash and 4 times bigger than the 2008 housing crisis. Cisco was the Nvidia of the 1990s, selling hardware for the internet boom. Their stock went from $7 to $77, then crashed 75%. 25 years later, they still haven't recovered. 2/3 of Americans own stocks. Trillions in retirement accounts could evaporate overnight. But here's the truly terrifying part. Even if the bubble pops, the damage is already done. The data's been extracted, the dependencies are formed, the thinking patterns are altered. Think about the last time you used ChatGPT. Could you have worked through that problem yourself? Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have been harder, but you would have learned something. You would have strengthened that muscle. Andrew Huberman explains that when learning feels difficult, when you have that sense of, this is hard, I'm struggling, that's not a sign you're bad at learning. That's the biological marker that learning is happening. Your neural circuits are being challenged and modified in real time like a muscle. Only 2% of people take the stairs when an escalator is available. We're wired to do the next easiest thing. AI living in our pockets makes outsourcing our thinking the new escalator. We're not using a tool, we're becoming one, prompt by prompt by prompt. Sam Altman admitted there's a bubble. He admitted someone will lose a phenomenal amount of money. But he said OpenAI would keep spending trillions anyway. Let us do our thing. The 6 companies controlling this aren't competing to build better technology. They're in a death struggle for something more valuable than money, control over human consciousness at scale. They created the problem, killed third spaces, replaced real conversation with likes and comments, made us isolated and addicted to screens. Now they're selling the cure, an AI best friend that never judges you. Create the problem, sell the cure, the oldest con in the book, executed with the most advanced technology ever created. The question isn't whether you'll break free from the dependency they've built. The question is whether you were ever really free to begin with. Free to